So I got this slab of oak from my brother, which was harvested locally here in New Jersey from his father-in-law's property. It had been drying for years, and once I got my hands on it, I wanted to make a bench. But in the meantime, my wife made our baby girl, so I decided to make a couple of serving trays for her baptism party. Get on the boat. I'll show you around. Okay, here I am marking up where I want to cut this slab in half. I found the center, and that needed to mark where the straight edge is going to be clamped. I had to make a small but critical adjustment because I pulled the measurement from the wrong side of the circular saw. And this happens sometimes, but it's probably why those expensive track saws are so popular right now. I made this cut in 3 passes because this oak is really dense, and cutting it in 3 stages was absolutely the best way to attack it. And at this point, I realized that I was filming, so I had to give my best Bane impression. I was born in the dark. I know that's not the line, so you can leave your cinematic hate messages below, but it's a nice way to get around a copyrighted Bane. My next step is to plane this piece as flat as possible without sacrificing too much of the board. I want to have enough material to work with later on in the build, but at the same time, I was making mental notes on how much epoxy resin I would need, and if it was too thick, then I would need more resin, and that would drive the cost of this build up. But again, this is for my daughter's christening, so the cost really didn't matter. But I'm always thinking about the overall cost of things as if I were to build more of them and then sell them. Okay, so after that round of planing, it was time to resaw these boards in half. I'd like to give a shout out to Newton Makes. He's a fantastic artist, maker / builder, and you can find him on YouTube. Anyway, this is his method of resawing that I've seen him use. First, we run the boards through the table saw in stages to part the boards partially in half. This helps in the resaw process by putting less pressure on the bandsaw, as the bulk of the material is being taken away by the strength of the table saw. The next thing I'm going to do is sand off the bark. This extra bark that's remaining on the edge of the slab needs to come off. I'd love to leave the bark intact because I just love the way it looks, but from what I've gathered in my epoxy river research, yes, that's a thing. The MO is to remove the bark. Maybe I'll do an experiment build in the future with some live edge and leave the bark on. Now, what felt like 3 hours of sanding finally came to an end, and I get to go to the bandsaw, and behold, Newton was right. By taking the time to pre-cut this material, the bandsaw was less taxed, and it made for a much easier pass through the blade. I've adopted a few resawing tricks on my own while I was building acoustic guitars, but this Newton method really helps for a smooth and easy cut. Okay, so a quick disclaimer. It did not take me 3 hours to sand down the bark, but I would like to ask you to like and subscribe to this channel and for this video. This is my first build that I filmed, and I'd like to see if anyone actually got entertained. So, now back to the planer, and with each pass, a little more material is lost. So this is a really crucial step. I wanted to make sure that I left enough of the live edge in order to make it actually look like a riverbank. So if I took too much off, you wouldn't see any of it, and that would defeat the whole purpose. Now here, I neglected to film how I made the mold, but later in the video, you'll see what it looks like when I remove the second board from its mold. I started by adding a very thin layer of epoxy with no color, and then I painted on the edges of the board in order to fill the grain as much as possible. And if you've ever seen any of these epoxy river videos here on the old YouTube machine, you'll know that bubbles are a final project's worst nightmare. The end grain of these live edge boards tend to be more porous, and it's easier for bubbles to form if you do not seal the edges before the large pores. We decided to use this blackish green of our mica pigment, and while I thought I had used enough in the first batch, stay tuned at the end where I identify some mistakes. You're going to see I used the propane torch to get rid of the large areas of bubbles out of the way, and it's important to keep the flame moving because you don't want to burn the epoxy. It doesn't smell good, and it's bad for your lungs, and it'll ruin your project. I don't have a big enough table saw to make the cuts that I need, but I always find a way around that. So I'm clamping a straight edge to my table and taking this board down to 12.5 inches because that's all my thickness planer can take. I'm making sure that I have close to an equal amount of material on each side of this epoxy river from the middle. Now, it's not, very crucial to do that, but I think it makes for a better look. But I have seen some people cut these boards on an angle and then pour the river, which is pretty cool too. Okay, so here I am demolding the second board that I made. This is a few days later. I wanted to add it here just to show you how the mold was made. Now, I always like to reuse material, and this is just some laminate masonite stuff. It kind of looks like the melamine that other people use, but I had made bunk beds for my kids and made railings out of that material. I figured it was close enough to melamine, and you'll see at the end with some of the outtakes or like the mistakes that I made that it works okay, but it gets stuck on. This is not the best. This is a Craftsman planer. It's okay. It's not a spiral head. It's just a straight blades. I really would love to have a thickness sander, but again, so expensive, and this is just a hobby of mine, something I really have fun doing. I kind of can't afford to get, but hey, you never know. I'm sanding and sanding and sanding, and although many people say they hate it, I kind of love this finish work. I go from 80 to 120 to 220, then I skip to 300, 400, 600, 800, 1000, keep on going, and mix in some wet sanding. Eventually, I just go back to using my orbital sander and putting a decent edge on it. I don't think this thin board needs to have a router, and to be honest, I don't really care about a super round over. Maybe that's just me, and you can make fun of me in the comments. And then finally, some cutting board conditioner, butcher block stuff, and we're all set. I love learning from my mistakes. I try to tell everyone to embrace your mistakes, learn from them, because a lesson learned is never wasted. Stay tuned to the end of this video, and I'll show you some of those mistakes. You could probably pick them out in these recap videos or photos, but let me know what you think. Okay, here we go, the mold. Well, this is not the best material to use. It's real thin. I used a demold spray, and it's okay, but I did crack it. Yeah, another boo, I know. Listen, that's okay. Embrace your mistakes. Do what you gotta do. Everything turned out okay, and that's the main thing. It's okay. Reuse what you got. I have no excuse. I should have added more pigment, but I wanted to make sure I had the river that you can actually see. But look at the smoke. You can see the smoke coming out. I did blow a couple breakers, and I had to, stop in the middle of the project. And I don't know if anyone's ever done this. You can comment below, but I had to raise my blade a little bit as the board was stuck. But I can admit my mistakes, and you got to learn from them. It's okay. You're gonna be fine, and these projects will make it. You just gotta love it. So clamping the straight edge, measure twice, cut once, or 3 times in this case. All right, I was measuring and I pulled from the wrong end. Awesome, nice job, Buck. All right, it's okay. If you don't have the right stuff, you got to do what you got to do. And if I had a track saw, it would have been easy. But you know what? It doesn't have to be easy. It's still fun. Okay, if you made it this far, I'd like to thank you for taking a ride on the boat with us. Like and subscribe, comment below, and until next time, Buck out.